Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppers with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. I've got a fantastic guest with me today. I'm really excited about having this guy on. I've met him in real life. See, I don't always meet my guests in real life first, but I have met this guy. And his name is John Cleary. So he is a personal brand photographer and he runs John Cleary Photography. John, welcome to the Human Conversation.
Hi Jules, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm really pleased you're here because I have had a preview of some of your story. So, you know, I'm privileged. For the listeners, we're going to dig deep. We're going to find out a little bit about where John came from. And then we're going to bring it up to date as to what you do now so that we just get the journey of John.
Sounds good.
All right. So, John, when you left school, what was it that you wanted to do?
I wanted to go into IT, but I wasn't really education compatible, here's the way I put it. I never really got on with school, just didn't enjoy it at all. And I'd done my A-levels and I just knew that I didn't want to do another 3 years of education at university. And so I didn't really know what I was doing. I had a Saturday job in Woolies. And
good old Woolies, John. Good
old Woolies. And they had a full-time job going. I thought, well, I'll just apply for that. At least it'll give me a bit of cash, just while I'm working out what I'm going to do. So I went for the interview and they said, why, you've just done your A-levels. Why on earth are you applying for a full-time job here? I said, well, that's what I want to do, he said, lying through his teeth. And they said, well, why don't you apply for retail management? So I said, okay. And I did, and I went for an interview in Birmingham and got offered a place as a training manager.
That's so cool. And do you know why I loved that immediately when you told me when I met you was, of course, my dad came from retail. I was brought up in retail. So it is my first love.
Absolutely.
So on from there, you obviously went on this amazing program. We had lots of programs back then, didn't we? I worked at NatWest Bank at 16, straight from school. Right. I was just like you. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I wrote 50 letters, just like my mum and dad told me I should, because in those days we wrote letters. And I got 3 jobs, and one of them was NatWest Bank, and that was the job I took. And of course, they all had these management programs going on. So you went on this program, and then, at what point did you get your own shop? Because kind of that's the thing, isn't it?
Well, that was obviously that was a plan. But while I was doing my training, Woolies decided that they were going to shut about 300 stores. There was a big store close down program, and they then had more training managers than they actually knew what to do with. So we'd all been trained, and what they at the time they shut down all those stores, they were transitioning from do you remember the red and the gold frontage, and then they changed it to the blue and the orangey colour. They just went to Woolworths from FW and Co Limited. So I got put onto the refurb team, and I had loads of fun in my early 20s, driving around the country, showing people how to do visual merchandising, which was a brand new thing in retail in those days. And we had a right old laugh. We were in hotels all the time. Used to go home at the weekends. So got my mum to do my washing for me, and then go off. And we were just out on the lash the whole time. It was great.
So misspent youth is kind of where you were at then, John.
Absolutely, yeah. They were my substitute university days, really, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you talk about visual merchandising. So if anyone's listening and they're thinking, well, what is that? Tell us a bit more about actually what that was.
Well, the way that shops always used to display stuff was along the shelves. So if you'd got I don't, for want of a better word, you've got personal along one shelf. That's the way you do it. But instead of doing personal and then have Arial at the bottom and bold at the top, you'd go Arial, personal, bold, so that everybody could see all three things. It's changed. I mean, it's changed again now.
Yeah.
What they do now is put the most expensive or most profitable in the eye line, and then all the cheaper stuff, stuff that's got less profit in it, goes at the bottom.
That's really fascinating. Actually, I think people who don't know this, the retail industry, they won't really realise half the things that goes on with merchandising, will they? Because it's really quite fascinating, isn't it?
Probably not.
But how do you know that now? Because is it that you just notice those things because you did it, John?
Yeah, it's just it gets ingrained, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing.
It just gets ingrained.
I worked in a hotel for well, actually, it was more a conference centre stroke hotel for 5 years.
Right.
I can't walk into a hotel now without just looking at things I would never have looked at before, you know. So it's actually a burden, John, I have to tell you. It's a burden.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's that it just becomes part of you, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. So you're on the lash. Okay, let's just swiftly move past that one, John. Presumably at some point you realised you couldn't probably live for the rest of your life doing that. What happened to change?
No, I got pulled away from that team and put onto another team called Kid Store, which was an experiment they had. They opened the first one in Ealing, and then there was one down South London somewhere, and then there was one out in Colchester. And that was like a Woolies for kids, so it was toys and sweets and clothes, basically. So I got pulled onto that team, and basically I was given almost complete autonomy in what I did, which was great. But actually, one of the funny things was, in my Woolies career, I worked with Phil Collins, Eddie Cochran, and Tracy Chapman, and none of them were the real ones.
Oh, really? I thought you were going to say the real ones then.
No, they weren't. They weren't the real ones. They were just people in Woolies, which was really funny. But then I did work, as we did the openings with Kid Store. We had loads of, I say big names. There were kids' names, so Timmy Mallet and Floella Benjamin, and I was once the bouncer Philip Schofield.
But this is the story. We have to make something of this. So tell us that one again.
So we booked Philip Schofield for half an hour to do. I can't remember whether he was opening it or it was an appearance. I don't think it was opening it, but he half an hour for an appearance. And the idea was that we took him out to the front of the store, get him to do signatures and everything. This was at the height of his popularity with the broom cupboard and
Gordon the Gopher.
Gordon the Gopher, that's right. So he turned up. The store was absolutely mobbed, and it took us half an hour to get him from the back of the store where he walked into it to the front of the store. We're like, he's got to go. How do we get him out of here? So we ended up surrounding him, running him out down Ealing High Street, round the back into the delivery lift, and take him back in. So I was once Philip Schofield's bouncer. That's one of my claims to fame.
I love that. And this came about me actually. Well, I did know this when I met you, because we did chat for a long time when I met you. But actually, I did a thing in my Facebook group, didn't I, John, where I said,
you did.
As far as I know, I'm the only one in the group who. And it was all about trying to reveal these really different things about yourself. And all of a sudden, John comes in and says, I was Philip Schofield's bouncer. And of course we giggled, we really did. But what a great story for you to tell.
Yeah, that was fun.
So your Woolies days were actually filled with quite a lot of fun. I think you did a lot of stuff by the sounds of it. And also, you developed a lot of skills by the sounds of it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So once Kid Store finished, I'd had a job, as I said, I'd had basically complete autonomy in what I did. I could do whatever I want. I'd get up in the morning, decide I'm going to go to Colchester today or whatever. And then that project finished, and I was put into the store planning department on Marylebone Road, which was just such a massive culture shock for me, having worked in stores and kind of being used to moving around, and then having even more autonomy and just being able to work in whatever store I wanted, to being kind of effectively chained to a desk from 9 till 5. And within a couple of weeks, I thought, this is not for me. I just can't do this. So I ended up getting out of it and going into other stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting, isn't it, when you think about the workplace today, and the fact that we are still doing this 9 to 5 thing. Companies are still doing that, and actually the autonomy, I think it helps you hugely to be more productive, more responsible, more confident. You think about what that brings when you do allow your people to just have that autonomy. It's really amazing, isn't it?
It is. Well, Google, I'm sure you know this, but Google, when you work at Google, they ask you to work on your job for 80% of the time, and the other 20% of the time you work on your own projects. And that's how stuff like AdWords and Gmail came about.
Awesome. I love that. So it's that creativity, isn't it? And I was reading a report the other day, actually, because I'm really starting to now get interested in data and stuff. I'm geekier than I thought I ever was, John. And I was reading a report about the things now that employers really need to instill, training wise into their people. It was things like creativity. It was about complex problem solving, but it was all these kind of creative out the box things that we've never thought to train our people in, or allow our people to flourish in. And they're getting the message now that we've got to let people be who they are, because that's the beauty, isn't it? It's completely my bag.
Yeah. Well, there it's, and it is the way it should be. I mean, I've been out of kind of business employment now for 10 years, so I feel a little bit out of touch with what's going on in employment, but I still do see lots of people who are kind of tied down to whatever, but it's but you're absolutely right. It does have to change, and you give people autonomy, and they will do better work.
Yeah, I think so. I think they flourish. So you've gone out of this planning role, obviously, because that was just a nightmare.
So I started work. I worked for a Spar, Spar, the corner shops, Spar wholesaler.
Yes.
Working with, they're not franchisees, but basically they're storekeepers to do refurbs. I then went and worked for a pharmacy shop fitting company. So anyway, I ended up working in Asda in store development, and my manager, I think, had taken me on because he'd seen the work that I'd done, albeit very, very briefly, in Woolworths, to do the store planning. And after a few weeks, he came up to me and said, "Can we have a coffee?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." He said, "What do you think of our computer-aided design system?" I'm like, "It's okay. It's good." It's like, "Are you sure?" And anyway, basically what he wanted me to tell him was it wasn't great, which it wasn't. And so they could do way more with it than, Woolies was using it to create bills of materials, all the parts that they needed to create all their shop fittings.
Yeah.
So he said, "Well, would you be able to rebuild a house?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." So anyway, I became the CAD manager basically for Asda, and then Asda decided to outsource their IT to IBM, and when one day I got a phone call from somebody in IBM, said, "Oh, I want to talk to you about your transfer to IBM." And I said, "I'm not transferring as far as I know, but I'd quite like to. Can we have a coffee?" So we had a coffee, and he said, "Well, yeah, you can come over." And I moved to IBM. So I spent a long time in IBM, and then soon after I joined them, I became a web content management consultant and worked on intranets with companies like Virgin Atlantic and BA and Shell Oil and Severn Trent Water and Boots and all sorts of other companies, which was great fun. And then I got to the point where I was starting a family, and the job that I was in meant that I was spending a lot of time living out of a suitcase in hotels, because I was, flying off here, there, and everywhere to see clients. And I just didn't want to be the sort of dad that was only ever saw kids at weekends. So I decided to find a new job within IBM. I mean, IBM's such a big company, there's a whole job market in there. So I became what's called a resource development manager, and that's basically sending some other poor people off to go and live in hotels while I work at home.
It's not quite as glamorous as everybody thinks, is it?
No, it's really not. It's really, really not.
Yeah.
It does sound glamorous, but very rarely do you get to go and do sightseeing. And by the time you finish working, and especially when you're working with clients, you've really got to be on the ball. So at the end of the day, you're absolutely knackered and not in any fit state to go gallivanting around. So you just basically, it's taxis, offices, travels, and hotel rooms, and that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I got this new job as a resource development manager, and I was working from home, and again, all the time in IBM, I could always see where I wanted to go to next, what my next role would be. And out of resource management, I saw a role which was in a global team with IBM HR, working on this incredible project, which was all about the life cycle of employees and kind of reducing costs in terms of hiring and firing. So I got involved in that, and I was on that project for quite a while. It's a really great project, but basically I was working from home all of the time, and I've really developed this constant low mood, which got to the point where I was off work for quite a while. I think probably 5 or 6 months. I really just wasn't right. Didn't really know what was wrong, but I knew I wasn't right, and really just not me. And over the course of the therapy that I had, I kind of realized what was missing, and what was missing was the human connection.
Human connection.
Yay!
That's it.
Human connection. Yeah, absolutely. But that's exactly what it was. I was seeing my wife and kids in the evening, but I wasn't having all the other normal conversations that you would have. Well, in fact, that's not even true, because I was having conversations. I was on conference calls all hours of the day and night. So I was talking to people, but there's something about actually being with people that I don't know, kind of keeps you sane.
And I wanted to talk to you about this, and I know you don't mind, because we've talked about it, but I think it's really important for people to listen to these things, because you hear all the time that men particularly find it really hard to talk about their feelings, how they are. If they've come into depression or breakdown or low mood or whatever happens to them, it's very hard for them to kind of come to terms with it or speak about it. And actually, that's what I love about you and I, is that we've been able to actually talk about this, because for someone listening, this could be really important to them. That's what the podcast is about. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And it is important to talk to people. And that was the reason I got poorly in the first place. But yeah, it is really important to talk about it. And I got through it, obviously, and the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing today is because of that. I worked out that the problem was a lack of human interaction, physical, face-to-face human interaction.
Yeah.
And having been a kind of fairly keen amateur photographer, I just thought, well, if I could do wedding photography on a Saturday, that would allow me to do my job, but then also get to see people. And I quickly realised that actually being a wedding photographer if you do it properly, isn't just a case of turning up on a Friday, on a Saturday to a wedding and spending the day with people. There's way more to it than that.
Yeah.
So I started this in 2009, and I left in 2011, and I've been full time ever since.
Wonderful.
Doing my own thing, which is great fun.
And I know you've done different types of photography. You've sort of had a lot of really interesting learnings around photography.
Absolutely.
And I think what I really wanted to touch on with your photography, because now we've come much more up to date, of course, is that you and I have this real alignment around human connection, around authenticity, being you. So this isn't just about your headshot type of photography, is it, John? Tell us more about what you're really achieving.
So what I learned was kind of as I've done this more professionally, and a few years ago I had a studio where I was photographing. It was basically makeover photography, and clients would come. They'd bring their sisters or their mothers or daughters or best friends. Had a fantastic makeup artist that I worked with, and they'd walk in off the street in their, they're just their, well, it might be a tracksuit or whatever, no makeup on. We do a before shot, and then we do an after shot. But that process of going through hair and makeup, and then me coaching them, and because quite often people come in, they would be very nervous about being photographed, and most people are nervous about being photographed. Most people don't like being photographed. And the thing is that when they don't like it, they have a face. We all have a photograph face, and when we see it, we don't like it. And I always think it's like a vicious circle. The more we hate photos of ourselves, the more we see, the more we kind of put that face on. And it's about breaking the cycle and actually kind of feeling comfortable in front of the camera. Because I was talking to somebody about this the other day. We've all got photos of ourselves, haven't we, that we love.
Yeah.
And the ones that are the ones we love quite often are the ones that we didn't know were being taken. Absolutely. Because we're just being ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
So I've kind of got quite fascinated in this whole psychology thing around photography and how it works, and how very tiny changes in head position or camera position or even just a smile can make a massive difference between looking okay and looking great.
Yeah.
So I kind of spend a lot of time coaching people rather than just sticking them in front of me with a camera and just click, there you go, there you're smiling, that's you done. It's about making people feel comfortable in front of the camera, and then really capturing the essence of who they are, so that they're really pleased and they're proud to show the photo off, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, because it's kind of like, well, what is the point in going through all this if you don't actually then want to show everybody the pictures afterwards?
Absolutely.
So it's lovely. But I think particularly when you link it then to business, which is obviously what we've talked about, and the fact you're a personal brand photographer, personal brand is huge. And this is my UHP, my unique human proposition. I'll drop that one in there. But this is because we are all unique. There's no other John on the planet. There's no other Jules on the planet. So then why wouldn't you try and portray that in your photography about your business? So you're almost creating a story of your business and where it comes from and your personal brand,
Completely right. And and this is why, because obviously, when we met, I grabbed you after you'd spoken at Woman Who, because I could just see the synergy between what we do. There is a lot of synergy, even though we're kind of different parts of the sales cycle. We are doing kind of the same thing. It is about being human, and this is one of the things that I'm trying to kind of get into small business people's heads, really, is that we all, and I've done it myself, we kind of talk about what we do, and then we move on to what we do for our clients. But the bit that's missing is actually putting ourselves out there, because people buy people.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at a website and you can't see who the person is that's telling you about what they do, people are less likely to buy you. And so if you can get your face in there looking great, then you're more likely to get to the next stage, which is the bit that you do, which is a sales conversation.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I've got this one picture, and I do like it, actually. I love it, there you go. I love a picture of me, and I'm holding a mug. I've got a cup of tea, and I'm holding a mug. And it's one of those pictures, it's very natural. I am looking at a camera, but it's just caught me, and I'm holding this cup of tea. I get so many comments from people about how much they love that photo. And I'm convinced it's because I'm holding a cup of tea, and I know that might not be it, but it's almost that real image of somebody every day. I don't know. I get lots of comments about it. So,
but I know the photo, and I think it's about the connection in the photo.
Yeah.
Because this is the other thing, is that if you've seen my photography, a lot of it, people are looking straight into the camera, and that's how you kind of form this connection with people, and that will be why people love that photo, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's like
if it's the one I'm thinking of, you're looking straight in it.
Pink top and a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's again, comes back to connection.
No, it does. And at some point, you and I have already said that we will most definitely do something together, I think, by way of some sort of workshop or something, because there's such a lovely value add, isn't there, for us to do something together for clients, I think.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I see that. So there's another little story just before we finish, because I hate to say that we've been chatting for quite a long time, and I could chat all night, as always. I'm a good chatter. But there's another story you told me about a guy, and you took a specific type of photo because of what he did and what he loved. And I don't know if you remember this, but you took him somewhere specific. Do you remember?
Yes, I know what you're talking about now. So this was a guy that rang me up. I'd met him actually speaking at an event, and he came up to me and said, I want to work with you at some point. I'm like, okay, yeah, that'd be great, thank you. Well, whenever you're ready. And I'm never pushy with people. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like, if you mean it, you'll come and find me when you're ready, type thing. And he actually sent one of his clients to me first off, because they needed photos before he did, and he was delighted with what I did. So we had the conversation. So with me, for a personal brand shoot, it's not just about let's rock up and start shooting. I go through a process with people to find out who they are, what's unique about them, what makes them tick, how their business works, etc. So this guy said to me, he said one of his interests was sculpture. And he's a marketing guy. So one of the things he said to me was, I get into people's heads. So I said, okay. So I'd got these two things, and anyway, then we started to, where we're going to shoot it. So I said, well, leave it with me. Let me have a think about what we can do. Anyway, I did a bit of research online for sculpture parks, and found this sculpture park which was absolutely perfect. And even better, it was about 50 or 60 miles away from where he lived. And in this sculpture park, there's it's kind of a profile of a head.
For the listeners who aren't watching on YouTube, if you couldn't see it, how would you describe it?
So if you imagine a silhouette of a head side on, so you can see the nose on one side with a hole in it, that's effectively how it would look for anybody who can't see. I thought, well, that's perfect. So we went to thing, and I got him kind of leaning in the sculpture in somebody's head at a sculpture park, which is stuff that he really loves. And he was absolutely delighted with it. And couldn't believe as well that he didn't know about the sculpture park.
Yeah, exactly. But how memorable is that then as a photograph? as well.
Absolutely. And he uses it all over the place. And I think it's very successful for him in terms of people remembering who he is.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you're very clever at what you do.
I
also think that it's so fascinating when I have these conversations on my podcast to think about where people have come from, where they started, what the jobs were that they had, and where they are now. You know, it's so incredibly interesting to see the journeys we take, the different places that we end up, you know, but actually we usually end up doing something we absolutely love, which is wonderful.
Yeah,
that's really
wonderful. It is.
So listen, thank you so much. I've loved our chat.
Thank you.
I knew I would.
It's been great.
I'm going to get all your links so that the listeners and anyone who watches on YouTube, they can see all the ways to connect with you, because we're all about connection.
Thank you.
As you know. And the minute John and I have decided when we will actually do something together, don't you worry, listeners, we will be letting you know, because
you'll know about it.
I'm excited about doing something with John. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, John.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I've loved it. I really have. And for the listeners, you know, obviously we hope you've loved it too. We hope you've learned a little bit about the journey of life. We hope you've learned a little bit about mental health, because we covered that too. And we also hope that you now understand what personal branding is really about, especially when it comes to photography, because John's your man, obviously. So thanks for listening. You know that we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, and we're on SoundCloud, and we're now on Stitcher. So follow us, like everything, put comments, put us up the charts so everybody can listen to the amazing human conversations that we're having. Thanks for listening this time. We will be back again with another human conversation. Ta-da for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website, www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.